Remember those old Wake and Bass films that would air on television during the holiday seasons? Well, it turns out that there is a supposed lost film that was created by the two animators, and it is believed to predate the original Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer film. The footage was said to be discovered in an abandoned storage unit in Hollywood, which also contained real stock footage and movie stills from the other well-known Wake and Bass films. The Super 8 canister was labeled Reindeer, so it was automatically believed to be the original footage taken of Rudolph's famed movie. Knowing that this could be a major artifact in the world of animation and Wake and Bass, the person who discovered it kept it for themselves, among with an old Super 8 projector. The individual, who, for the sake of their friends and families I will keep anonymous for reasons I will explain later, viewed the footage while they took notes on every aspect. The following account is a combination of all noted details they made about the film. The film begins with the opening titles seen in the original Rudolph film. The blizzard gusts out the names of those who were most noted for creating the film, including Wake and Bass. But one detail that I have noticed, which is especially strange for a holiday film, is that there was no audio whatsoever. Not even the sound of the girls could be heard, let alone the holiday music which sets the mood. When the wind was near the moment of unveiling the title of the film, I always came to the conclusion that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer would appear. But as the wind blew away the snow, the title Randolph the Reindeer appeared, instead of the trademark look of the title that we fans have all come to know. The title appeared in dull, block-shaped letters. I then knew at this point that I was viewing an entirely different film, but I pressed on, thinking it was some sort of prototype version of the original Rudolph film, and that it was never finished and released. The snowy wind blew away to reveal an older reindeer, who I assume was Randolph. But the most interesting detail about him was that his fur was completely black, instead of the brownish hue given to Rudolph in the original film. We see him casually walking through the wintry forest, showing no emotions on his face. He continues to walk until he runs into two other reindeer, one of them looking similar to Fireball. One strange detail besides the reindeer being completely black is that there was no audio of the characters talking to one another. Only the sound of grainy footage can be heard, increasing the uncanny atmosphere of the film. The two reindeer seem to be mocking Randolph, one of the few traits to the original film. You can clearly see the two characters laughing at him, showing more hatred with every giggle. A zoom in of Randolph's face shows the pure anger he had towards the reindeer. The screen then changes to real-life footage of two reindeer brawling with each other, crashing their antlers together. At this point, I knew this film was made by someone other than Wake and Bass. This detail, among others, doesn't add up to being a joyful holiday film, but possibly a spin-off or a parody of the original Rudolph movie. The footage of the two reindeer fighting lasts for about a minute. The screen then flips back to the public sequence. The mangled body of the Fireball-like character is shown full-blown, causing an audible gasp to escape me. He laid there on the blood-stained snow, his entrails laying beside him. The image stayed this way for about a few seconds, until it changed to the next scene. It was then that I came to the conclusion that Randolph had visibly mauled the other reindeer, while the second one most likely fled away in terror. The next scene shows Santa's castle, which was done in black and gray colors instead of the well-known pinkish shades in the original film. The screen then fades out to Santa and Mrs. Claus in the dining room area. Both were wearing black-colored versions of their original outfits. Santa's being the trousers and suspenders, and Mrs. Claus with her dress and apron. At this point, audio returns to the footage, and we hear the two arguing about Christmas-related problems. Mrs. Claus spoke with an irritable tone, as if he was angry with Santa about something. Santa's responses came out in a depressed manner, dragging out some words in a gloomy fashion. The audio is once again lost, and the quality of the footage goes from mediocre to complete crap. The scene stays on Santa and Mrs. Claus, but the two puppets were not animated into the footage. It looked as if the animators were just holding the puppets, moving them in a childish manner. In some frames, the fingers and hands of the animators can be seen for a split second. The scene then cuts back to Randolph scrolling through the footage, but in the opposite direction as opposed to the beginning of the film. Blood could be seen trickling off his antlers as he leaves bloody hoof tracks in his gait. The scene seems to repeat itself as if the footage was used over and over again, until the scene changed. But one thing that I've noticed is that there was no sign of any of the forest critters from the original film. Rabbits, seals, raccoons, and even birds could not be seen. It wasn't until a few seconds into the sequence when my nose was laying in the snow as Randolph continues walking. As he walks by, the corpses of birds, rabbits, and raccoons lay in the snow beside him. The most disturbing detail about this is that the bodies appeared to have been eaten by something other than an animal. Randolph continues to walk, not stopping even once to notice the bodies beside him. But before the scene changes, I notice something lying next to the last body on the screen. Lying next to the carcass of the rabbit was a knife and fork. The scene fades out to the elf workshop, filled with busy elves building toys. A faint bell can be heard, and the elves begin to exit the room. We see Homie about to stand up, but is immediately assaulted by the head elf. He begins screaming at Homie, but the audio is gone, so all you can make out is the two characters mouthing words. One strange aspect about the head elf I've noticed is that he looks more primitive, with a saggy beard and tattered clothes. Homie sported worn-out clothing as well, and both characters seem to have large scars and marks on their hands and faces. At first, I was confused about this detail, thinking that there were arrows on the sculpture of their faces. But then, I came to a conclusion that frankly disturbed me. Santa had forced the elves to work non-stop on the toys, and any disobedient elves were whipped. The head elf finishes his conversation with Homie and walks out of the toy shop. Homie is now alone, a single light shining above his head. For a few seconds, he simply stares at the toy train he had been working on before. He then reaches over and grabs a mallet and proceeds to strike the train repeatedly. The screen stays on Homie as he emotionally smashes the train into pieces. The camera then zooms in on the train, which has now been reduced to a pile of wood and splinters. The scene then fades out. It fades back in, and we see Randolph sitting in his cave next to a cardboard box. He simply stares at the opposite wall for a good few seconds, unblinking. There is no sign of his parents. I only could expect something terrible must have happened to them, seeing the nature of this film. The scene then shows Randolph picking up a revolver from out of the box. He slowly puts the gun under his chin and pulls back the hammer. The scene abruptly cuts to black before it could show him pulling the trigger. A icon in plain white cursive font appears on the screen, stating the words, 4 months later. It fades in, and we see a group of elves and reindeer. All elves were wearing black elf uniforms, and we see a coffin in front of the crowd, containing Randolph. The most eerie aspect about him in this scene is that he shows no sign of decomposition, as if he had died just yesterday. The crowd then lines up, and they began to say their farewells to Randolph. After a few elves pass by, a female reindeer comes up to the coffin and places a blood-soaked antler next to his casket. I assume that this was Fireball's mother, who still grieves over the death of her son. Santa and Mrs. Claus come next, then the head elf, leaving Homie for last. He steps up to the coffin and began to say his farewells. Near the end of his statement, audio returns to the film for one last time. He then bends over the casket next to Randolph's ear and whispers the words, "There's a storm coming." He then walks away. The last few seconds of the scene shows a zoom in on Randolph's face, which still has a massive hole in his head from where the bullet has exited. The film then ends. Authorities later found the person in their home, who apparently had gone mentally ill upon viewing the movie. In addition, the phrase, "There's a storm coming," was found written in black Sharpie on the walls of the living room. And the dead body of the person's pet dog was discovered in their bedroom. The actual film itself mysteriously disappeared after its first viewing. To this day, authorities and psychiatrists are still unable to figure out what caused the person's symptoms. Or, more importantly, why. For anyone who's reading or listening to this, I have a warning for you all. If you ever find a copy of this film, or the actual reel itself, do not under any circumstances watch it. As of now, we can only hope that the film is never discovered again. If it is found, however, I can only hope that the individual has read or listened to this warning beforehand, and will destroy the film out of their own safety and for others. However, if you choose not to heed my warning, and watch the film regardless, don't say I didn't warn you.